How many Dracula remakes is too many? I believe it was in 2023 we had the Demeter, then in 2024 we had Nosferatu, and now in 2025 we have another version of Dracula. In my opinion, the limit does not exist. There's a reason people keep coming back to these movies over and over and over again. So I got a chance to watch it, and I had some thoughts. Was it a good movie, and what were the psychological themes that it explored? Spoilers incoming, but since honestly the plot is not very different from other versions of Dracula, there isn't really anything that you shouldn't see coming. Let's get started. So the plot starts with a love scene between Vlad and Elisabeta, his princess wife. And this initial scene does a really good job of showing rather than telling the love that they have for each other. It shows both passion and whimsy, friendship and love, danger and innocence. It starts off quite similar to Dracula 1992. Vlad is called off to war and he leaves. We see him on the battleground with the same sort of metal face shield that has the shape of an animal. The difference in the beginning is that we actually see Elisabeta get killed. This time she doesn't throw herself from the castle, rather she's killed by the enemy. Vlad begs the priest to bring her back to life, and when the priest tells him that that's not possible, he kills the priest and basically renounces God. Then we jump forward 400 years to France. We're told it's a century after the revolution, so somewhere around 1889. A priest is called to investigate a 130-year-old woman who happens to be an Italian vampire from Bologna named Maria. The priest and doctor find out from her that Vlad is coming to France to search for his princess. In the meantime, Jonathan Harker goes to Dracula's castle. Dracula greets him with the same look as the 1992 version. When Dracula catches him discovering other parts of the castle, he imprisons him and tells him his story, how he threw himself over and over again from his castle window hoping to die after Elisabeta's death, but it never happened. How he searched for his princess for centuries. Now back in France, the doctor and priest have a photo of Elisabeta. As soon as they get the photo, they get a notice that Mina is right next door, and Mina has a striking resemblance to the photo. Mina tells them how she's friends with Maria. Maria took her under her care when she sort of recognized her as the doppelganger. During this time, Dracula comes from Romania to France. He helps Maria escape, and then Maria shows up to Mina's doorstep and takes her to a carnival where she introduces her to Dracula. There, Dracula and Mina connect, and afterwards, the doctor and priest find out that she met Dracula and they warn her about him. They say, listen, like Jonathan Harker just came from Romania and he says that he was in prison there and this guy's evil. But Dracula appears in Mina's room. They start hooking up. She asks him to bite her. The same chase ensues as in the 1992 version, as in the Robert Eggers version. Ultimately, the Christians kill Maria. Then they chase Vlad and Mina to the Romanian castle. And in the end, of course, Dracula dies. As he disintegrates into ashes, all the flames go out in the castle. So like I said, it was pretty similar to the 1992 version with a couple original additions, namely the character of Maria, who I found to be a great addition. She sort of resembles Lucy's character a little bit, and I did wonder if there were maybe some sapphic hints in there, because Mina says at one point that Maria was speaking about romance to a point that made her uncomfortable, and there just seemed to be some facial expressions that showed Maria might have been jealous of Mina's love with Dracula. Not sure if anyone else caught that. And then another original addition was the setting being in France instead of England. And with it being the Revolution celebration, a century since the Revolution in France, we also got a lot of Rococo-style looks at the Palace of Versailles. So that leads me into one thing that I enjoyed about the movie, which was it was very visually beautiful. I loved Elisabeta's look in the beginning, where she's wearing this taupe fur-trimmed coat, a long veil, a bejeweled headpiece. Also, like I said, at the Palace of Versailles, the Rococo aesthetics were definitely serving. And I also found the carnival scene to be very vivid and atmospheric. In terms of the psychological themes, the movie really hinged on the portrayal of grief. In the very beginning of the movie, both Vlad and Elisabeta say that they cannot survive without the other. And I think that this type of love sometimes makes people uncomfortable, but there is a reason why, for instance, married couples who have been together for decades and decades, when one of them passes away, the other one soon follows, almost as if they died of heartbreak. When you've been somebody's companion for so long and you have such a strong connection with them, in many ways it's almost like you've become one. One half of that entity entity ceasing to exist means that the other half doesn't have the will to live anymore. It's incredibly sad, and like I said, it makes people uncomfortable to hear this. People will say like, no, you should still have a life outside your marriage, you should still have hobbies, you should still have things that once your partner passes away, you still want to live as well. But I don't know, I think when you have such a strong connection after decades and decades, that seems like a very hard task. I don't know how I would feel in that position, and I think I'm a pretty resilient person, but a lot of what makes life so beautiful is getting to share it with your other half. And I think the portrayal of grief also shows that it's more often about us than it is about the other person. Because whether you are atheist, Christian, whatever, unless you believe that that person who died is in hell now, most people would acknowledge this person is at peace or they have no consciousness. They're not in pain, they're not upset about their death. So when we feel grief for people, it's much more about just missing that person, about wanting them to be there and experience life with us, about not understanding how it is that life goes on without them in it. Grief in a lot of ways, when you think about it, is very egocentric. And realizing that doesn't always make it hurt less when you're in the thick of it, but it is sometimes helpful to sort of zoom out and realize that hey, this is not about any harm befalling the person that's passed away. This is more about my pain. At one point, Vlad digs up Elizabeta's coffin and sees that she's just ashes at that point. And this also feels important to me because when we're grieving, the grief makes us believe that that person is not really gone. Our minds just kind of struggle to make sense of the permanence of it all. Death is something so permanent that we keep dreaming about that person. We keep accidentally thinking that they're next to us, envisioning their reaction to whatever we're experiencing. Our brain cannot really comprehend that that person is gone forever. And that's why back when I was a therapist, for example, when I had clients who were going through grief, my supervisor at the time encouraged me to, sort of remind that person, use language that reminds them of the fact that this person is truly gone as sort of a reality check. And also this version of Dracula, I think, shows us that grief can turn us into monsters if we don't accept what we have lost. But this movie is also about finding love again after loss. It raises this question, are Mina and Elisabetta the same person? Both of them do the same sort of hand wave thing in front of the fire. Mina has certain, what I would call reincarnation memories, except it's more than reincarnation because she doesn't just have the same soul as Elisabetta, she also has the same body as her doppelganger. When she hears the song playing on the jukebox, she actually has visions where she remembers from her life with Vlad as Elisabetta. Maybe doppelgangers are a metaphor for how, when you experience sort of love at first sight, it sometimes feels like you've known that person for an entire lifetime. Or alternatively, how some people fall in love with someone because that person reminds them of somebody else that they loved in the past. I will say with the second one, there is something just a little bit objectifying about loving someone because they remind you of someone you loved in the past. Because you're not really seeing them for them, you're seeing them for somebody else. You're sort of relegating them to the role of a ghost. And another theme in this version of Dracula was this idea of putting your selfish passion for a person second to your love for them, sort of putting their needs above your own. Because at the end, Dracula has to make the sacrifice of not being with Elisabetta for eternity, not turning her into a vampire because it's ultimately not what's good for her soul. He's telling the priest, she is my salvation, and the priest replies, but you are her damnation. And we see that love is ultimately selfless. Love is ultimately not, let me possess this person. Let me be with them forever if it's not what's best for them. Love sometimes means letting a person go free if that's what's in their higher good. But also we see this idea of idolatry that's common in Christianity, where Christians are expected to put their love for God above their love for actual people in their life. He's supposed to put accepting God, repenting for his sins above wanting to be with Elisabetta forever. So those were the psychological themes that I noticed. Definitely curious if you've seen the movie, what you thought about them. In terms of critiques I didn't think that this movie brought much new that the 1992 version hadn't already covered. So I'm not quite sure why they decided to make it, aside from the fact that Dracula remakes are always popular. I also didn't like that it seemed they maybe casted one Romanian tops. There was one person who was speaking Romanian who seemed to have a natural Romanian accent, but otherwise when I was looking at the cast members, they did not seem to cast Romanians in the Romanian scenes, which like may not seem like a big deal to you, but it always irks me a little bit when movies that take place in Romania don't actually cast people who are familiar with the culture and the language, and yet they are claiming to portray that culture. Like, how do you know if you're portraying it accurately if you're not actually consulting the people from that culture? I also had heard ahead of time that this movie was less action-filled than typical Dracula movies, that it was more about like the psychology of longing, and I didn't really find that to be the case very much. It was much more action-filled than I expected going into it. But ultimately, if you love all things Dracula or all things vampires, you should watch it. It's a fun watch, and like I said, the limit does not exist to how many Dracula remakes is too many. Have you seen the movie? If so, let me know what you thought about it down below, and I'll see you soon.